Hi, you're listening to the Apologist Bookshelf. Gary Zacharias here. This sounds so good. Here's what J.P. Moreland said about this book. The single best volume I have ever read for preparing students to follow Jesus and flourish as his disciple in college. Does that sound good? It did to me. I tell you, I teach college classes, and the students there are hearing a lot of things from different teachers that are going to conflict with their Christian background, aren't they? We all know that. So many sad stories of kids who've gone off to college as good Christians, maybe involved in Bible fellowships and heavily involved in their youth group at church, and they've gotten blown out of the water when they went to church. I know Frank Turek, when they went to college. I know Frank Turek said there was a dad that contacted him and said that exact same story. His daughter was heavily involved in Christian activities when she was in high school. She went off to college, and the first break they had, she came back home. She said, "Dad, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore." And the dad was horrified. So are there ways that we can prepare kids when they go off to college to get ready for this onslaught that's going to happen, and it's going to get just stronger and stronger? Yeah, and I've done a couple of podcasts already on one book, and I'm sure there are other good ones, but this was called Welcome to College. It's the second edition, by the way. Sean McDowell, who, of course, is Josh's son, said this book has been his go-to book for helping students prepare to succeed spiritually, relationally, and academically in college. So it's not just, stay close to Jesus, the end. No, it's got a lot more than that. So instead of reading some of the titles of the chapters, you know what I like? They're short chapters. But let's skip over that. And let me just move so we can use our time effectively. I'm going to chapter 8. It's called True Tolerance, subtitled Tolerance Just Ain't What It Used to Be. And then I like they start their chapters with a lot of good quotes. Jonathan Morrow, by the way, is the author. I like the way he starts. Truth is not bigoted. People can surely be bigots. How we approach and communicate truth is what determines bigotry and narrow-mindedness. That's from one person. And then Proverbs. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he'll be wise in his own eyes. Yeah, that's a good one, huh? Now, how about this one from Ephesians 4:25? Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. And so he points out, I say they, it's Jonathan Morrow, points out that he already covered in a previous chapter that truth. What do we mean by truth? Right? Because Ephesians said we're supposed to speak truthfully. So what is truth? It's whatever corresponds to the real world as it actually is. So if I say it's cloudy today and you look outside and there's not a cloud in the sky, I wasn't being truthful. So it's what somebody says to see if it relates to reality. Of course, that's called the correspondence view of truth. So if something is true, it's going to be true for all people at all times and in all places, regardless of what somebody believes. So everyone might be wrong about what the truth is about something, but everyone can't be right. I mean, that's hugely important. Let me say that again. You could say that was a 72 Ford that just went by. Somebody else says, I think that was the 74 model. Somebody else says, no, that was a 76 model. Everybody could be wrong. It could be a 1980 Ford. But everyone can't be right. It can't be at the same time a 72, a 74, and a 76 model of the Ford. That's impossible. And so, since everyone can't be right, Morrow points out that's where tolerance comes in. Or, at least it used to be before our society got all confused. So, good thing is he starts with a dictionary definition. So he says there are actually two definitions for tolerance. First is the acceptance of the differing views of other people and fairness toward the people who hold these different views. Yeah, I think that's a good definition there. I'll get to the second one in a minute. So it's accepting, right? Tolerance is accepting different views. I'm a Christian, you're not. Okay, I'll be tolerant, and you need to be tolerant as well. We need to be fair toward each other. There's a second definition. The act of putting up with something or someone irritating or otherwise unpleasant. Yeah, we need a lot of tolerance these days. But, as Morrow points out, those definitions have been tossed. What do we have today? Well, the idea of tolerance today means you agree that everybody's moral and spiritual views are equally true. Equally true. One person speaks out on Joseph Stalin and really loves what Stalin did, and somebody else says, no, what he did was wrong. They're both okay. Those views are equally true. And if you disagree, or if you don't accept somebody else's beliefs, guess what you're called? Yeah, you know where this is going. You're called intolerant. He quotes Paul Copan. If disagreement didn't exist, then tolerance would be unneeded. It's the existence of real differences between people that makes tolerance necessary and virtuous. See, that's exactly right. You have to have disagreements. Then you can be tolerant. If everybody agreed with you, you don't need to be tolerant. They all agree with you. No problem. Then Morrow quotes Dallas Willard. Tolerance has suffered a great deal recently in our religious and political and educational areas. And tolerance, because truth has been pulled away from it, has slipped over into the idea that everything is equally right. No longer is tolerance a matter of saying, I disagree with you and I believe you're wrong, but I accept you and I extend to you the right to be wrong. See, that's the old definition. I disagree with you, but I'm going to be tolerant of you. Back to Dallas Willard, he said, that's not enough. We're now in the situation where everyone must be equally right, where you cannot say that people are wrong and still claim to love them. So there we are. So Morrow quotes a Harvard graduate, did a commencement address some time ago, and this is what this person said. The freedom of our day is the freedom to devote ourselves to any values we please, on the mere condition that we do not believe them to be true. Oh, can I say that one again? Because that's just really discouraging. This Harvard grad is saying, what's our freedom these days? To devote ourselves to any values we please, on the condition we don't believe them to be true. Okay, so we just pick values. We pick things that resonate with us. We don't look for truth. And you know where that's going. If people pick the things that resonate with them, it's going to be selfish. It's going to be lacking strong morality, isn't it? So Morrow says, what's the message that we're hearing these days? Believe whatever you want, but don't think you actually have the truth. That's intolerant. And Morrow said he experienced that when he went to college. So he was sitting in a class one day, and they had what they call controversial topic day. So he said the teacher came up with a controversial topic or some kind of really difficult ethical dilemma, and then asked the students, go on this side of the room if you agree with that, and go to the other side of the room if you disagree with that. And so it started with easy statements like cheating is wrong. Okay, who thinks it's wrong? Go to one side of the room. Who thinks it's right? Go to the other side of the room. And then the teacher got up to more volatile issues like euthanasia and abortion. Morrow said he knew what was coming. So the teacher said this, okay, go to one side of the room or the other. Here's the statement. Do you agree or disagree? As a Christian, you believe all non-Christians are going to hell. Oh. So Morrow said he stood up and he walked to the side of the room, agreeing the statement was true. Guess how many people were on that side? Okay, so the statement was, as a Christian, you believe all non-Christians are going to hell. He stands up there and says, yeah, he goes over to the side, it's true. He says, I was the only one. The rest of the class was across the room staring at me. He said, then you could hear the students starting to say things like, oh, that's so judgmental. How can you believe that? And Morrow said, well, as a Christian, I believe the Bible is true. And Jesus said, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Said, oh, well, that didn't go over big at all. The other students cut him off. Hey, that's closed-minded. One person called him a judgmental SOB. And it says the teacher allowed that intolerance for Morrow's religious beliefs to go on for about another 2 minutes before stopping it and moving on to another question. Morrow said, I didn't have a name for what was happening at the time, but he said that was somebody calls Christianophobia now. So after class, the guy who called Morrow an SOB came up and said, I completely disagree with what you believe, but I respect you had the guts to stand up for what you believe. And Morrow says he knows it was the Holy Spirit that gave him the courage. And he said, I'm not telling that story to brag, but just to illustrate what happens in a college classroom. Yeah, anytime many professors have an opportunity, they're going to bash Christians. Morrow says, I call this the tyranny of tolerance. He said we see it on university campuses, we see it in the media, things like speech codes, bullying, personal attacks. There's a USA Today columnist and author, her name was Kirsten Powers. She documents example after example in a book called The Silencing, How the Left is Killing Free Speech. And she's a liberal. She describes herself as a liberal. So she's not some person who, hates conservatives and thinks they're up to stuff. She's a very sharp liberal individual. So Powers, in her book, says this: the illiberal left, right? She thinks she's a liberal, but she says the illiberal left hunts down heretics, dissidents, and run-of-the-mill dissenters to not only silence them, but to make examples of them for the rest of society. It says, with no sense of irony or shame, the illiberal left will engage in racist, sexist, misogynist, and homophobic attacks of their own in an effort to delegitimize people who dissent from the already decided worldview. In other words, as long as you agree with their worldview, you're okay. The minute you disagree, now you get name-called. All right, so back to Powers. The illiberal left sees its bullying and squelching of free speech as a righteous act. On campuses, she says, there are speech codes, so-called free speech zones, and a host of, quote, anti-discrimination, unquote, policies that she says discriminate against people who dissent from lefty groupthink. She says Christians and conservative groups have been denied official university status by student government organizations for holding views not in line with liberal dogma. Can I give you a quick example of that? Cal State San Marcos in northern San Diego County, some time ago, treated a pro-life group on campus. It was a club, treated them differently than other clubs and wouldn't spend the money or allow them to have certain people on campus, even though they were a recognized club. And so they sued because they didn't get the same amount of money and they weren't treated the same. And that pro-life group won. Yeah, because look what's going on here. You get punished by these student government organizations for holding views that they don't think you should have. And then Powers ends up saying the illiberal left yearns for a world sanitized of information that offends them. Oh, isn't that a great comment? People today are so sensitive. Oh, that hurts my feelings. Oh, I am offended. And therefore, not that I need to grow up and not that I need to figure out why I disagree with that, not for me to come up with my own arguments and rebuttal. No, if I disagree with you and you bother me, then you should go away. And your ideas should not be presented. How many times have we seen examples on college campuses where a conservative speaker or a Christian speaker is set to come, and then a small group will rise up and create chaos, and then the college will say, well, for safety's sake, we're not going to have that person come. Yeah, we've seen that a lot. All right, so back to Morrow's book. At the end of the chapter, I like that. He calls this the bottom line. So he said, so what's the bottom line? He said, more than likely, you're at a school that has that new definition of tolerance. So here's the challenge. You're going to have to decide how you're going to respond when you're put in a situation that challenges your faith. Are you going to stand up for the truth? It may be uncomfortable or unpopular. He said, remember, being courageous doesn't mean we aren't afraid. It just means we choose to move forward in spite of fear. Isn't that a great comment? Being courageous. Were soldiers courageous because they had no fear? No, they took their fear, swallowed hard, and went ahead and did what they needed to do. So at the end of the chapter, Morrow says, let me conclude with a couple of things for the reader to keep in mind. It says, first, the Bible reminds us in Luke 12 that the Holy Spirit helps believers know what to say when they get in tough situations. So Morrow's saying, God's with you. He's with you in these tough times. Then the second point that Morrow wants to say, when you find yourself in a hostile situation, remember yourself, this is all headed toward a college student, right? So it works for adults out in the business world as well, doesn't it? But this book primarily is for Christians heading off to college. So secondly, when you find yourself in hostile situations, remember, you need to respond with gentleness and respect. Now, I'm going to interject something and go back to Morrow here, but I think that is so powerful because the person that ends up losing his or her temper and getting flustered and all is the one who actually loses the argument. There may be people, like if you're in a debate somewhere and you're challenged by a particular person and you respond, there may be other people who are listening and may actually take to heart what you said, even if the person you're talking to doesn't react. I always remember the example that Lee Strobel told. He went in one day to work and he challenged this guy. They got into a discussion and Lee challenged him with the Christian worldview, and the guy just blew him off. And Lee Strobel thought, wow, that was kind of a waste of time. What did I do? How come nothing good came out of that? Because he prayed about it. And then a few days later, there was a guy that had been in the room doing other things, and Strobel hadn't even noticed him. And he came up to Lee and he said, you made some good points, Lee. Can we talk about that? So that's, somebody called that ricochet apologetics or ricochet evangelism. In other words, you aimed one place and it went firing off in a different direction. So who knows? That may be the way it happens for you. So first point that Morrow says as he wraps up the chapter, remember, the Holy Spirit's going to help believers know what to do and what to say. Secondly, gentleness and respect. He says standing up for what you believe is great. Yeah, sure. But you've got to do it the right way. We shouldn't be arrogant. We shouldn't be self-righteous. We don't want to name call, certainly. So he says how you say what you say matters. So he says don't raise your voice. Don't yell. So already they think Christians are angry. So don't reinforce that. Be respectful. Be tolerant in the true sense of the word of others' beliefs. I mean, after all, and this is me speaking again, but after all, people who disagree with us are not enemies, are they? They've either been blinded by the devil or they've had some kind of indoctrination over the years or whatever, but they're people made in the image of God. We need to show love and respect. If somebody challenges us online or wherever it is, we've got to keep cool and pray about it and acknowledge them as made in the image of God just like we are. So be respectful, he says, and tolerant. But remember, tolerance doesn't mean you have to agree that all beliefs are equally true. So there we go again. At the very end of the chapter, again, I like the book because what it does is sums up the points that he's made. So here are the big 3 points. Tolerance means extend to others the right to disagree with you, but treat them with respect and dignity even if you don't agree with them. Secondly, it says tolerance doesn't mean for you to have to agree that all beliefs are equally true. That's just mentally, it just doesn't make any sense. Rationally, it makes no sense. It can't be raining and not raining at the same time. You can't be a bachelor or not a bachelor at the same time. I mean, all beliefs are not equally true. And then last point, God is with you. It will help you know what to say in a tough situation, but we've got to do it in a humble and loving manner. And then to wrap up the chapter, at the very end, he has a section called For Further Discovery, and he's got some books that people might like. One is Paul Copan, True for You but Not for Me. That's a really good one. True for You but Not for Me. Another one is one I've not read by David Kinnaman, Kinnnaman. Good Faith, Being a Christian When Society Thinks You're Irrelevant and Extreme. So it's titled Good Faith. Then you've got Josh and Sean McDowell. Together they wrote a book, The Beauty of Intolerance. Isn't that funny? The Beauty of Intolerance. We actually do want to be intolerant, don't we, at times? We want to be intolerant of sexism and racism. There are a lot of things we want to be intolerant of. It just depends, what are we intolerant about? If we're intolerant about other people disagreeing with us, that's bad. But so there's a good and there's a bad kind of intolerance. Randy Newman has an article, Why Are Christians So Intolerant? Okay, now he doesn't buy that. He's going to deal with that statement. And then the book that I mentioned earlier in this podcast, Kirsten Powers, wrote a book called The Silencing, How the Left is Killing Free Speech. And then one last one, George Yancey, Yancey, Hostile Environment, Understanding and Responding to Anti-Christian Bias. And then something that I didn't know about is, I hope it's still around because this is not a brand new book, but it's called Explore Truth, And that's a 7-session online study taught by the author, Jonathan Morrow, to help people break free of relativism. So it's called Explore Truth. All one word, put them all together. ExploreTruth.tv. Okay, so once again, this is Welcome to College. Oh man, this book has so many good things in it. I hope you have a chance to take a look at it someday, pass it along to somebody you know who's going off to school, or just look at it yourself. So many good things, like intolerance. You're not just going to encounter that in college. It's all over the place. All right, well, thank you so much for being part of this podcast, and I hope your day is going well.